A former Mossad agent facing off a former general for Kadima leadership as Ehud Olmert prepares to leave politics. But what about his legacy, and what does his departure mean for the future of Israel's ruling party? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Hashim Ahalbarra. Kadima, Israel's largest party, is about to have a new leader who could go on to be the country's next prime minister. The current leader, Ehud Olmert, announced plans to resign in July amid allegations of corruption. Prime Minister has had a difficult run. His predecessor, Ariel Sharon, had a stroke in 2006 and Ehud Olmert took over as a caretaker prime minister. He went on to win the following elections but has been dogged by scandal ever since. The police have recommended his indictment after 2 investigations. Olmert is alleged to have double-claimed money from the government for trips abroad and to have misused money from an American businessman. 2008 has seen Ehud Olmert's approval ratings fall to a new low. The potential indictments and pressure from within his own party have led him to step down before his full term is up. So, who will take his place? There are 4 contenders for the leadership of the party, although 2 are far ahead of the others in the polls. Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni is a centrist. In her 9-year political career, she's remained clear of corruption allegations and has been seen as pivotal in the peace process with the Palestinians. Her closest rival is Shaul Mofaz, Transport Minister. He's an ex-military man and former Defense Minister who argues his experience is greater than Ms. Livni's. The candidate with the shortest political career is Avi Dishta, Minister for Public Security. As former Director of Security Services, he has been accused of war crimes against the Palestinians by groups outside of Israel. And last but not least, there's Interior Minister Meir Shetrit. He was first elected to the Knesset in 1981, but has since upset both Jewish and Arab voters with controversial comments. Kadima is now the largest and the youngest political party in Israel. It was formed in November 2005 by Israel's former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon after he formally left the right-wing Likud party. Sharon was very keen to unilaterally disengage with the Palestinians. He had strong popular support for this approach, except within his own party. So he established a new party which granted him the freedom to carry out his policy. His plan attracted centrist politicians from both Labour and Likud. Sharon headed a transitional Kadima government till he suffered a disabling stroke in January 2006. At that point, Olmert became the caretaker premier, eventually winning the March 2006 elections. So, will the winner of the primary elections become the next leader of the party and the country? It's not that straightforward. The main challenge for the new Kadima leader will be to stitch together a coalition government. If he or she succeeds, the new prime minister could be sworn in as early as the weekend. But forming the coalition could also take months. If there's new coalition, then the parliament, which reconvenes on the 26th of October, could vote to dissolve itself. Then an election must be held within 5 months. Alternatively, President Peres could mandate another person in Kadima to take charge, or for that matter, the leader of another party to try to form a government. Meanwhile, it's possible Olmert may continue as caretaker prime minister until new elections can be held. However, he could be asked to step aside, in which case Livni, as his current deputy, would become caretaker. Joining us today are our guests in Tel Aviv, Dr. Ra'anan Gissen, former senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, and in Ramallah, Basim Zbeidi, analyst and professor of political science at Birzeit University. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us to talk about the election of the leadership of Kadima. Let me start by asking Mr. Ra'anan Gissen in Tel Aviv, is this election about who is going to succeed Olmert, or is it more about the future of Kadima?
Well, it's a very good question, I think, because it's the first election in the Kadima Party. Just for the sake of your viewers, Kadima was established by Sharon in order to fulfill certain political missions and goals that he had, particularly the disengagement. And so he broke away from his old Likud party and started with Kadima. So now is the first time that there are any primary election hastily organized in Kadima because of the predicament of Prime Minister Olmert, which requires to decide who is going to be the next leader of Kadima. Whether that leader will also be the next Prime Minister of Israel is a big question, and that depends on certain processes of which we just have started. I mean, the arduous road toward the next Prime Minister of Israel starts today. After the results of the election, the primary election will come through, we'll know who will be the candidate that will attempt to form a new coalition government and continue.
Elections usually are more about candidates and the issues at stake, but this time why we have this feeling that the election is more about the character itself, about the candidate himself? We have Mofaz versus Tzipi Livni.
Well, you know, I think Sharon has begun to develop a party, but he did not leave a legacy. A legacy meaning the road the party should take, the ideology. All this was in a formative stage when he fell into a coma. And therefore, the only thing that the candidates could actually offer is their own personality at this stage. This is not an established party that had an ideology. It had a direction. It was supposed to be the new centrist party in Israel that will take voters, disillusioned voters, both from the left and from the right. But it didn't have a chance to actually form a legacy. And therefore, the contention in this primaries today is really personal elections. Each side, each of the four parties or each of the four candidates is trying to present his case, why he should be the one that would lead Kadima. And there is not much of an ideology or any ideological differences between the four.
And not much of a tradition because, as you said, the party was established just a few years ago. Let me involve Mr. Bassem Zbeidi in Ramallah. Mr. Bassem, how is this election perceived from a Palestinian perspective? Do the Palestinians think that the new leadership of Kadima will affect the daily political life of the Palestinians?
Well, definitely it will impact. We have Kadima in power for over a year or so. And the deeds on the ground are very clear. Kadima is basically perpetuating and continuing the hardline approach that the Israelis have been applying for basically for a decade and a half regarding the Oslo deal and implementing what was supposed to be implemented in order to get us as Palestinians into a Palestinian state. So the implications are here, but there is a wide conviction on the part of the Palestinians that this change is strictly an internal Israeli affair, and it will not really have any positive impact regarding the future negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis, because everybody is aware that Kadima is maintaining basically also a hardline approach towards the conflict with the Palestinians. So we are basically expecting a status quo. We are expecting the old things to be maintained, and probably even more radical approach if Livni wins the election. After all, Livni is a civilian. It comes from a civilian background, and in order to prove her security credentials, probably the victim should be the Palestinians. She will
adopt maybe a radical stance. Let me go to Mr. Ra'nan Ghessen. Two frontrunners, Tzipi Livni and Shaul Mofaz. Do they have the potential to reinvigorate the Kadima Party, which has been tainted by the corruption scandal, the 2006 war in Lebanon, which has been described as a failure by Israelis?
That's a very intriguing question because, you know, the onus of proof is on them. They've never been prime ministers before, so the public cannot really judge. They're very talented, both. They were chosen personally by Sharon when he established the Kadima Party because of their qualification, because of the fact that he thought that each one of them in his own field could make a difference compared to what happened in the Likud. So I differ with Bassam about the issue of that Kadima is a continuation of the same policy, but in another form, another party. Kadima really made a change in terms of moving the peace process forward, in terms of the negotiations, in terms of the overall effort to move the peace process ahead, both with the Palestinians as well with the Syrians. But whether these two persons are capable of managing not only the party, but leading the country, that's a different question. And in my view, because of the difficulty in Kadima today, there is no escaping going for early election in 3 or 4 months.
And whichever candidate wins the election, he has to put together a coalition. And let me go to Mr. Zbeidi. In this case, as you know, we will have to wait and see whether the coalition will lean towards the right or the centre or go closer to religious parties. This game of trying to stitch together a coalition, is it a sense of concern for the Palestinians?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that whatever group, whatever coalition, whatever aggregation of politicians are going to be assembled in Tel Aviv, it will have an impact on us as Palestinians, on daily lives, in our daily lives, as well as on the prospects of the negotiations between both sides, Palestinians and Israelis. But no, in the sense that genuinely it's not really a big issue. It's an issue that doesn't make much difference for many Palestinians, because these kind of transactions, political transactions, are basically internal ones. They are conversations within the Israeli community. They are not really a conversation that is honest, that is new, that is creative, that is accommodative with the Palestinians. If we look into the platform of whether it's Mufaz or Livni, the platform is the same, is a kind of platform that will keep us where we are now, very far away from any tangible, concrete steps toward really granting us as Palestinians our rights. So in that sense, no such a possibility, whether the alliance is going to be with the right or the left, is not going to have a significant impact on us.
Mr. Ranan Gissin, the post-election era will create definitely a new realignment of political life in Israel. Is this going to provide the Israelis with a moment of clarity, or just further deepen the political crisis?
Well, you have to understand that the election of a new government is not a single issue government. It's not just a government that has to deal with the Palestinian. One of the most difficult jobs in the world is being a prime minister in Israel, because you have so many problems and challenges which you have to deal with simultaneously. Now we have the economic tsunami. There is the threat from Iran. There is Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south. I mean, no prime minister can ignore that. There's no doubt that the Palestinian issue is one of the centerpieces in any future policy. But a prime minister has to deal with all these problems. And in order to deal with these problems effectively, he must first gain public support. Democracy, as Churchill said, is a very cumbersome system, but all the rest are worse, because they're not done by the will of the people. And in order for the people to express their will, eventually, in 3 months, in 6 months, they'll have to send the mandate back to the people and let the people decide which of the parties or which combination of parties would lead the country. That's the critical issue, and that's I would say, the core of the crisis, not just the relationship with the Palestinians.
Well, in the second part of the show, we'll definitely devote more time on the foreign affairs and the foreign agenda. Well, it's time for a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the future of Almost Peace legacy with the Palestinians. Stay with us.